War Council chamber fell into stunned silence. Towering alien warlords, some armored in living chitin, others draped in shimmering ceremonial robes, stared in disbelief at the lone human standing in the doorway. Jack Reynolds took another step forward, his boots leaving a trail of blood on the polished obsidian floor. His uniform, torn and scorched, clung to him in tatters. A dozen plasma burns marked his body, but he remained standing, his posture unwavering. In his right hand, he clutched the severed head of the Supreme Overlord. The alien's grotesque face, frozen in an expression of utter shock, lolled against Jack's fingers. He tossed it onto the central table. The wet thud reverberated through the chamber. "We're done here," Jack said, his voice hoarse. The warlords flinched. These were beings who had conquered entire star systems, who had enslaved lesser races without a second thought. And yet, here was a single battered human standing before them, having done the impossible. The Krith Dominion had underestimated humanity. They would not make that mistake again. 1 week earlier, Jack hated mission briefings. Not because he didn't understand the stakes. If they failed, Earth would burn. But he hated the way the room smelled of too many bodies, the way the fluorescent lights buzzed just loud enough to gnaw at his nerves, the way every mission plan always sounded so much simpler than reality. And this plan? This was insanity. Across the table, Dr. Madison Carter tapped her stylus against a glowing hollow map of the Krith's capital. "The Overlord's fortress is a nightmare. Layered defenses, biometric access, an entire army stationed within a mile radius. We can't just sneak in?" Jack folded his arms. "Then what's your brilliant idea?" She grinned. "We make the system think we belong." Jack sighed. He had known Madison for years, long enough to recognize that particular glint in her eye, the one that meant she was about to do something reckless but disturbingly effective. "Keep talking," he said. Madison pulled up a schematic. "The Krith process everything through rigid protocols. They don't improvise. We use that against them. I can patch a false identification profile into their security network, make them register us as part of their own internal security force." Corporal Travis Miller leaned back in his chair, arms behind his head. "And what happens when they start asking questions?" "We answer in their language," Emily Rodriguez cut in. The team's linguist had a quiet, calculating presence, her dark eyes scanning the hollow map with practiced focus. "I've been studying their command patterns. Krith officers follow a script. As long as we don't deviate, we can keep them convinced we belong." Jack exhaled slowly. "That's a lot of ifs." Madison shrugged. "It's better than charging in guns blazing." Travis smirked. "Speak for yourself." Jack looked at his team. They weren't soldiers, not in the traditional sense. Madison was an engineer who saw logic as something to be bent, not followed. Emily was a dreamer, always believing there was a way to talk through a fight instead of shooting her way out of one. And Travis? Travis was the wild card, half genius, half lunatic, the kind of guy who could build a bomb out of a coffee maker and duct tape. And they were supposed to take down the most feared warlord in the galaxy. Jack ran a hand down his face. "Fine, we do it your way. But the second it goes south, we switch to plan B." Emily raised an eyebrow. "Which is?" Jack glanced at Travis. Travis grinned. "Explosions." 3 days later, the stolen transport ship rattled as it entered the Krith-controlled airspace. Jack sat in the co-pilot seat, gripping the armrest as the vessel trembled. The Krith weren't known for comfort. Everything in their ships was built for efficiency, not ease. In the seat beside him, Emily adjusted the ship's outbound transmission. "Incoming hail. They're requesting identification." Madison's fingers danced over the console. "Give me a sec. Okay, try now." Emily pressed a button. A guttural insectoid voice crackled over the speakers. Emily didn't hesitate. A pause. Jack held his breath. Then the Krith officer responded. Jack exhaled. They were inside the fortress. The Krith built their cities like labyrinths, sharp, angular corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, every wall humming with unseen energy. The team moved in formation, dressed in stolen Krith armor. It didn't fit right. Travis's sleeves were too long. Madison had to modify the helmets to accommodate their human physiology, but from a distance, they passed. They reached a security checkpoint. A Krith officer scrutinized them. Jack felt his stomach tighten. Before he could reach, the fortress was on fire. Sirens howled through the corridors, an eerie, pulsating wail that sent Krith soldiers scrambling into defensive positions. Shadows flickered against the walls as emergency lights bathed everything in a deep crimson glow. The air reeked of scorched metal and ozone from recent plasma fire. Jack Reynolds sprinted down the passageway, rifle clutched in his hands, boots pounding against the floor. Behind him, Travis Miller lobbed a grenade over his shoulder without breaking stride. An explosion rocked the hallway, sending a shockwave of heat against Jack's back. "Well, so much for subtlety," Travis said, grinning. Jack shot him a look but kept moving. "Keep the explosives to a minimum," Travis scoffed. "Buddy, you're asking me to deny my true nature." Behind them, Emily Rodriguez and Madison Carter lagged slightly, their stolen Krith armor proving more cumbersome than protective. Madison clutched a handheld device, her fingers flying over the screen as she tried to override the fortress's security network. "Bad news," she called. "They've locked down the command sector. We won't be able to reach the Supreme Overlord's chamber through standard routes." Jack gritted his teeth. Of course, it was never going to be that easy. "Options?" Madison chewed her lip. "We could overload the ventilation grid and use the maintenance tunnels, but..." "Done," Travis said, already reaching for his detonators. Madison rolled her eyes. "Or I could bypass the lockdown remotely, no explosions required." Travis sighed dramatically, but put the detonator away. Jack exhaled. "Do it fast. We don't have much time." Emily, quiet up until now, placed a hand on Jack's shoulder. "They know we're coming." He met her gaze. "I'd be worried if they didn't." Deeper into the fortress, Madison's hack worked, just barely. The security grid flickered, and for a brief window, the doors to the command sector slid open. Jack signaled for the team to move, and they darted through before the system corrected itself. The deeper they went, the stranger the fortress became. Krith architecture was designed for efficiency, but something about this place felt wrong. The walls hummed as though alive, and doors led to dead ends that hadn't been on the schematics. "This isn't just a fortress," Madison murmured. "It's a shifting maze." Jack felt a knot tighten in his stomach. "They're trying to confuse us?" "They're succeeding," Emily muttered. Travis pointed to an intersection. "Left or right?" Emily studied the symbols etched into the walls. Her linguistic expertise had gotten them this far, but Krith writing was designed for them, not humans. She took a breath. "Right." Jack didn't question her. They ran. The decision proved costly. They rounded the corner and came face to face with a squad of Krith shock troopers, heavily armored, wielding plasma carbines that hummed with lethal energy. The lead trooper hissed. Jack moved first. He raised his rifle and fired a burst into the closest Krith's chest, the impact sending the soldier staggering. Travis hurled a concussion grenade, the explosion knocking several troopers off balance. Emily ducked behind cover, taking precise shots, while Madison scrambled to reroute nearby security turrets. Plasma bolts slammed into the walls around them, sending sparks cascading through the air. "We need to move," Jack barked. "Working on it," Madison shouted. A Krith lunged for Travis. He sidestepped, drawing a combat knife and driving it into the creature's throat. Black ichor sprayed across the walls. "That all you got?" he taunted. The moment stretched, seconds turning into a brutal eternity of exchanged fire. Jack felt the burn of a grazing shot along his arm, but ignored it, pushing forward, forcing the Criff back. Then, the tide shifted. Madison let out a triumphant shout as the automated turrets reactivated, only this time targeting the Criff instead of them. Gunfire erupted from above, and the Criff soldiers were torn apart by their own defenses. Jack wasted no time. Move! They pushed forward, leaving behind the smoking bodies. The Supreme Overlord's chamber. The final barrier between them and the Supreme Overlord was a massive set of reinforced blast doors. Madison pulled up the control panel, her fingers flying over the keys. This is it, she said, no turning back after this. Jack glanced at his team, Travis bruised and grinning like a lunatic. Emily reloading her rifle with methodical precision. Madison focused, determined. They had come too far to stop now. Open it, Jack ordered. The doors slid apart with a heavy hydraulic hiss. Beyond them lay a vast chamber, its ceiling lost in shadow. The Supreme Overlord stood at the far end, flanked by two towering Criff Guardians. His exoskeleton gleamed in the dim light, his multifaceted eyes locking onto Jack with something akin to amusement. The Overlord rasped. Jack stepped forward, gun raised. Not so pathetic if we made it this far. The Overlord chuckled, a deep, clicking sound that echoed through the chamber. Emily exhaled slowly. Guess we'll see about that. Jack didn't wait for the Overlord to make the first move. He fired. The room exploded into chaos. One of the Criff Guardians lunged, swinging a massive bladed limb. Jack barely dodged, rolling beneath the strike and unloading 2 rounds into his chest. Travis detonated a charge, sending debris flying, while Emily and Madison flanked the Overlord, keeping pressure on his defenses. The Supreme Overlord was fast, too fast. He weaved through their attacks with unnatural precision, striking back with brutal efficiency. Jack felt a clawed hand wrap around his throat, lifting him off the ground. The Overlord's mandibles parted in something like a grin. Jack struggled, vision blurring, and then Travis did something reckless. He grabbed a live explosive, yanked the pin, and shoved it into the Overlord's mouth. Chew on this, Travis muttered. Jack kicked free, landing hard as the grenade detonated. The Overlord reeled, screeching in agony, his mandibles shattered. Jack didn't hesitate. He surged forward, drew his combat knife, and in one swift, brutal motion, severed the Supreme Overlord's head. The body collapsed. Silence fell over the chamber. Jack exhaled, his grip tightening around the Overlord's skull. He turned to his team. Let's get the hell out of here. Jack Reynolds gripped the Supreme Overlord's severed head as the fortress trembled around him. A low, ominous rumble echoed through the chamber, dust falling from the ceiling as the structure's automated defenses came online. Madison Carter checked her wrist console, eyes widening. Bad news. Killing the Overlord triggered a full lockdown. Every exit is sealed. Jack cursed. How long until reinforcements get here? Emily Rodriguez was already scanning the alien comm chatter. Minutes. And they're not just sending grunts. We're talking elite enforcers. Travis Miller cracked his knuckles, stepping over the Overlord's twitching corpse. So, what you're saying is, we're definitely gonna die. Jack shot him a glare. Not if we move. Options? Madison tapped frantically at her console. The main hangar's out. Security fields are up. But there's an emergency escape tunnel beneath the fortress. It's meant for high-ranking officials, but if I override the access codes... Travis grinned. Then we just stole ourselves a VIP exit. Jack didn't waste time. Then that's where we're going. Move! The team sprinted out of the chamber. The corridors twisted and shifted. Madison's earlier theory was right. The fortress was a shifting maze. But now it wasn't just confusing. It was collapsing. The Criff had activated the sterilization protocol, running the gauntlet. As they neared the escape tunnel's access point, a deep, Mechanical voice boomed through the fortress. Panels in the walls slid open, revealing mounted turrets that whirred to life. Jack barely had time to shout before the first volley of plasma fire rained down on them. "Cover!" Emily shouted, diving behind a fallen support beam. Travis ducked and yanked a smoke grenade from his belt. He pulled the pin and tossed it down the corridor. Thick, billowing clouds filled the passage, obscuring their movements. Jack gritted his teeth. They were sitting ducks here. "Madison, how close are we?" "Tunnel access is 3 floors down," she yelled, tapping furiously at her console. "But security systems are rerouting all paths. Every hallway is leading us away from it," Emily cursed. "They're trying to trap us inside." Travis adjusted his rifle. "Well, they're doing a damn good job." Jack clenched his fists. There had to be another way. Then it hit him. "What about the Overlord's private route?" he asked Madison. She blinked. "What?" Jack gestured behind them. "He had to have a direct route to the tunnel. A failsafe. Can you find it?" Madison hesitated. Then her fingers flew across her console. "Maybe. Give me a second." They didn't have a second. The turrets adjusted their targeting parameters, compensating for the smoke. The first round of fire tore through the haze, forcing them to retreat further. Then another threat arrived. At the far end of the corridor, a squad of Criff enforcers marched into view. These weren't standard soldiers. Their armor gleamed with reinforced plating, and their rifles were oversized, meant for raw stopping power. Jack's stomach sank. This just got worse. The lead enforcer raised his weapon. Madison's console beeped. "Found it!" She slammed her hand against a wall panel. A section of the floor split open, revealing a vertical chute with an anti-grav field shimmering inside. Jack didn't think. "Go! Now!" Travis grinned. "Best order you've ever given." He jumped first, vanishing into the glowing abyss. Emily followed, then Madison. Jack turned just as the enforcers fired. A plasma bolt grazed his shoulder, burning through his armor and into flesh. He bit back a cry of pain, gripping the Overlord's severed head tighter. Then he jumped. The descent. The anti-grav chute spat them out in a dimly lit tunnel beneath the fortress. The walls were slick with condensation, the air thick with the scent of ozone. Travis groaned, picking himself up off the floor. That was not a smooth landing. Madison ignored him, already scanning the tunnel. "We're close. The exit is just ahead." Jack took a breath. "Then let's move." They ran. The tunnel was eerily silent compared to the chaos above. Every footstep echoed. The only sound was their breathing and the distant hum of machinery buried in the walls. Then Emily slowed. "Wait!" Jack stopped. "What?" She pointed. "This tunnel? It's too empty." Realization dawned on Jack a second too late. The trap sprang. The tunnel's walls exploded inward. From the rubble, Criff dreadguards emerged, hulking, genetically enhanced warriors bred for one purpose: slaughter. Their weapons weren't firearms. They didn't need them. Their bodies were weapons. Jack barely had time to react before one lunged. He rolled aside as a massive clawed hand struck the ground where he'd been standing, cracking the reinforced floor. Travis let out a low whistle. "Okay, these guys are big." Madison backed up. "Jack, please tell me you have a plan B." Jack did, but he hated it. He tossed the Supreme Overlord's head to Emily. "Run," he said. She caught it, eyes widening. "Jack, go!" Emily hesitated. Then she turned and sprinted toward the exit. Madison and Travis exchanged glances before following. Jack turned to face the dreadguards. One of them, a towering brute with dark carapace plating, tilted its head. Jack rolled his shoulders. "Probably not." Then he charged. Emily, Madison, and Travis reached the tunnel's exit, a blast door leading to the barren wastelands beyond the fortress. Madison slapped the control panel. "Come on, come on!" The door groaned open. Sunlight flooded the tunnel. Then they heard the sound of something massive hitting the ground. Emily turned, dread creeping into her chest. Jack staggered toward them, bruised, battered, but alive. Behind him, the tunnel collapsed, burying the dread guards in a cascade of rubble. Jack exhaled. That was unpleasant. Travis raised an eyebrow. You just fought two of those things? Jack nodded. Madison frowned. And survived? Jack wiped blood from his lip. Barely. Emily stared at him. You're insane. Jack smirked. Took you this long to figure that out? Then sirens blared in the distance. The Krith weren't done hunting them. Jack turned to his team. We're not safe yet. Let's go. And they ran. The Overlord's head still clutched tightly in Emily's hands. Jack Reynolds ran. His breath was ragged, his muscles screamed in protest, and every step sent a fresh jolt of pain through his battered body. But he didn't stop. None of them did. Behind them, the fortress continued its slow collapse, smoke and dust billowing into the air. Krith patrols had already begun sweeping the wasteland, scouring the jagged landscape for their escape. Emily Rodriguez clutched the Supreme Overlord's severed head against her chest like a lifeline, her grip tight despite the sweat slicking her palms. Madison Carter kept glancing at her wrist console, scanning for any sign of an evac point. Travis Miller, despite the situation, was grinning like a man who thrived on being chased by death. Jack finally spoke between heavy breaths. Tell me, we have an exit. Madison didn't look up. Working on it. Jack glanced over his shoulder. The Krith were gaining. Madison cursed under her breath. Okay, bad news. Travis snorted. Because everything so far has been great? She ignored him. The extraction team, our guys, they're not here. Something jammed their signal. Jack clenched his fists. Then we need a new plan. Madison kept working. I might have one. Travis grinned. I like where this is going. Madison shot him a look. No, you won't. Jack exhaled. Just say it. Madison pointed to a jagged ridge ahead. There's an old Krith outpost about a mile from here. It has a long-range transmitter. If we get there, I can punch through the jamming field and call for backup. Jack considered it. What's the catch? Madison grimaced. It's guarded. Travis laughed. That's not a catch. That's expected. Jack nodded. Then we take it. The outpost was a rusting hulk of Krith architecture, curved walls, biometal plating, and spires jutting into the sky like skeletal fingers. The place looked abandoned. But Jack knew better. He signaled the team to stop. Emily, how many heat signatures? She adjusted her scanner. 6, maybe 7 hostiles. Mostly light infantry, but... Jack raised an eyebrow. But? Emily frowned. There's something big in the lower levels. Travis flexed his fingers. Define big. Madison cut in. Let's not find out. We just need to get to the transmitter. Jack nodded. Fast and quiet. Travis grinned. So not my specialty. Jack sighed. Just try. They moved in. Emily took down the first sentry with a precise shot to the skull, his body crumpling before he could sound the alarm. Jack and Travis cleared the entrance. Moving with brutal efficiency, 2 Krith barely had time to react before Jack's knife found their throats. Inside, the facility was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of stale coolant and rust. Madison pulled up the schematics. Transmitter is 2 floors up. Jack nodded. Move. They advanced quickly, dispatching scattered Krith with ruthless precision. The transmitter room was just ahead when the floor shook. A guttural roar reverberated through the structure. Emily's voice was tight. That's the big thing, isn't it? Then the doors exploded inward. It was massive. The Krith Apex Enforcer loomed in the shattered doorway, its exoskeleton glistening with reinforced plating, its 4 arms ending in vicious curved blades. Its eyes glowed with an eerie predatory light. Madison took a step back. That is so much bigger than expected. Travis whistled. I think I'm in love. Jack ignored them. Focus! Take it down! The Apex Enforcer charged. Jack dove aside as a bladed arm tore through the metal floor where he'd been standing. Emily unloaded a full clip into his torso. The bullets barely dented its armor. Travis, cackling like a madman, fired an explosive round directly at his chest. The blast staggered it, but only for a moment. It turned, eyes locking onto him. Travis blinked. Uh-oh. The Enforcer moved. Jack tackled Travis out of the way as a blade sliced clean through a metal support beam. Sparks flew, and the outpost groaned under the strain. Madison shouted from the terminal, I need 2 minutes to send the distress signal. Jack gritted his teeth. Buy her time. Emily reloaded, switching to armor-piercing rounds. Go for the joints, she fired. The Enforcer roared as a bullet shattered one of his knee plates. Travis rolled to his feet, pulling the last high-yield grenade from his belt. Hey, ugly! He tossed it. The explosion sent the Enforcer sprawling. Jack didn't hesitate. He surged forward, slammed his boot against his chest, and fired 3 shots into his exposed neck. The creature spasmed, its body twitching. Then it went still. Jack exhaled. Status! Madison's console beeped. Signal sent. Jack helped Emily to her feet. Then let's... A warning klaxon blared. Madison's face paled. Oh, come on. Jack didn't need to ask. The Krith had picked up their signal. Reinforcements were inbound. Emily clenched her fists. We're out of time. Then, from above, a human gunship roared through the clouds. The dropship's cannons opened fire, tearing through the advancing Krith forces. Madison whooped. Rescue party's here! The gunship hovered over the outpost as a voice crackled over their comms. Reynolds, you alive down there? Jack smirked. Barely. Get aboard, fast! They sprinted onto the ship's loading ramp just as the Krith retaliated. Plasma fire streaked past them, but the gunship's shielding held. As they collapsed into the seats, Jack slumped against the wall, exhaustion finally hitting him. Emily set the Supreme Overlord's head on the deck. The sight of it, lifeless, defeated, felt surreal. Travis let out a slow exhale. Holy hell, we actually did it. Madison leaned back, eyes closed. We did. Jack watched the battlefield shrink below them as the gunship ascended. The war wasn't over, but this battle, humanity had won. For now.